Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to take a look at some of the reasons why various journalists and political commentators in the mainstream media think that a summer election is looking reasonably likely. But first, it's worth noting just why this is important, why it has been and is going to continue to be the most relevant political discussion until Sunak calls that election. So consider the political situation. The Tories are a zombie government. They're doing nothing of value. They've not acted to come up with a plan to repair and replace the schools and hospitals and other public buildings that are literally collapsing. They don't have a plan to deal with the fact that the prisons are overloaded. You know, it's always short term. Oh, stop sending them to prison for a bit while we release some prisoners early or something. There's nothing they're doing to tackle the issue. NHS waiting lists, they remain way higher than when Sunak took over, and they were at record levels then. The cost of living crisis continues to bite. I mean, there seem to be more excuses for why houses aren't being built than the actual houses being built. Polling consistently shows that people want a change of government, and they want it quite soon. Sunak's messages to the public are no longer being heard. He's given a big speech on Friday. I strongly suspect that it won't move the dial at all. Voters are just tired of listening to him and his ragtag party. They're just sick of him. They've already got it in their minds. Look, we're having a change now. Change of government. Thank you very much. Goodbye. At the same time, there's not really much new to be learned from Labour either. They've announced their policies. They were ready for the election last year, remember? So their policies are basically announced. There's been tweaks as circumstances have changed. The exact wording in the manifesto will not be known for certain until it's published, which can't happen until Sunak calls the election. We're in a sort of political purgatory. And so with the exception of tales of skullduggery amongst Tory rebels seeking to replace Sunak before the election, there's really not a lot going on. And so as much as it might upset Sunak, discussing the various factors which might make certain dates for the election more or less likely is going to be a major chunk of political commentary now. You're going to have a major discussion each week, at least in the media, and I'm certainly going to, because that's the only area of serious political interest. You know, the latest article on the subject in the Times thinks that Sunak is being tempted to call a summer election. In a Times radio discussion, which I'll link below, the reasoning was expressed that the Tories simply can't stagger on for much longer. I'm not convinced by this reasoning, though. Not because it's not true, but because Sunak doesn't seem to share the view, and perception is everything here. A year ago, I said that the longer Sunak leaves it, the worse it will get, and it's gotten worse. The polling was worse last autumn than it was last spring. It's worse now than it was last autumn, and it actually, yes, probably will be worse this autumn compared to now. Some people find this surprising on the basis that, well, Tory support's like at record lows. Surely it can't go even lower. Why can't it? I talked earlier about how Labour are now going to press the Tories on their plan to abolish national insurance because there is no way of achieving that without making life worse for retired pensioners. No way at all. We still don't know how the Rwanda plan is going to resolve itself, but it seems unlikely it will resolve itself in favour of the Tories. It is, at the very least, a huge gamble on Sunak's part. It could easily make things worse for him and further empower Reform UK. Reform UK are openly saying that they are in a position to take over from the Tories as the main opposition on the right wing after the election. They cite the fact that they are polling comfortably the third highest political party in the UK. Now, you may look at the MRP polls and go, yeah, but with the first past the post system and their support spread so relatively evenly, they're not actually going to win a single seat. You know, that share of the vote is not going to be concentrated enough in any seats to get a single MP. Absolutely true. There are in reality probably 2 or 3 seats they might target, but probably they're not going to win any MPs, right? But that is not necessarily how many voters see things. There's a lot of voters who don't really understand our electoral system unless certain features are pointed out to them. They will see strong polling figures from Reform UK and they'll think, oh, they get even more than the Lib Dems. Oh, that would probably mean they'll get more seats than the Lib Dems. They'll see them just a few percent behind the Conservatives and think, oh, they're nearly as strong as the Conservatives. They'll see them as a credible alternative. I mean, imagine if Sunak actually gets his way. Let's say he gets his Rwanda bill passed into law in the next few weeks, and then Summer sees record numbers of boat crossings anyway. I mean, he's sunk then, isn't he? Quite frankly, I think Sunak must be betting the farm that his bill never gets passed into law. But as to this notion of the Tories being unable to stagger on much longer, how do we know? The Tories can stagger on for as long as January 2025 if they decide to. The only thing which could force Sunak to act would be a credible threat to his leadership. But as long as the clear majority of Tory MPs believe that it is better to stick with Sunak than try for a fourth leader in 2 years, then he can stagger on for a while, yeah. And I think that on the balance of probability, the Tories would be better sticking with him. I mean, if they could replace him with someone credible, and I would accept Penny Mordaunt might appear more credible, and they could do it quickly and tidily, you know, no mess, no fuss, you know, no damaging leadership contest, then okay, that might work. It would still be a gamble, but it might just work. But I don't think the far right will allow anything to happen tidily. Oliver Dowden, Sunak's deputy, is reported to be urging a summer election. Obviously, he's a close ally of Sunak, so his opinion will presumably be valued, but it doesn't mean Sunak will be swayed if his personal priority is the India trade deal and he wants to hang on as long as it takes to get it. Where those eyeing a summer election may be on stronger ground is the suggestion that Sunak ends up in a Theresa May style accident. That, you know, the threshold of 53 letters needed for a confidence vote happens not because there's a real momentum to oust Sunak, but because Tory MPs just, as a knee-jerk reaction to the local election results, write their letters and it accidentally goes over the 53 threshold, which none of them really intended. That is possible, but there are a couple of things I would say about that. First, we don't really know that the Tory MPs will think the results are bad, even if they are bad, because it's perception. What will class as bad? I think the most important results next month will be the mayoral contest, not so much the council elections. I think the Tories have already priced in terrible results in the council elections. But to be considered bad, I think they have to lose both of their current mayors, as well as do really badly in the London contest potentially as well. But this is all very much in the balance. The Tories might retain their existing mayors in Tees Valley in the West Midlands. It's entirely, I mean, the polling's all over the place at the moment. I've really no idea. They actually could retain both of them. Both of those mayors are sort of reasonably popular in their areas and they've distanced themselves from the Conservatives. So they could both win. At which point, you know, Tory MPs may consider that the local elections weren't all that bad. That may prevent the push for a confidence vote. The second thing to consider is that although a confidence vote, if it does happen, will weaken Sunak and the Tories, it won't necessarily be fatal. In fact, it may be that Sunak wins it by a large margin, like John Major style margin. If Tory MPs realise that there isn't a majority ready to get rid of him, then they will know it only harms themselves. If Sunak wins the vote by an unimpressive margin, that just weakens everyone. So that might motivate MPs to vote for Sunak, even if they'd like him to go, to vote for him, to thinking to themselves, it's way better that Sunak wins heavily than wins by a small margin, in their own interests. Other arguments I've heard mentioned include the fact that the latest polling suggests a majority of voters want the election by summer. Adam Bolton on this Times radio thing was saying, you know, this puts pressure on Sunak and his government. Why? How? No, it doesn't. This isn't an argument. If Sunak was in the habit of being under pressure to do what voters wanted, he would not be in the mess he currently finds himself in. You might argue it could put pressure on Conservative MPs because the more they look like they're evading the public, the more inclined the public will be to punish them at the ballot box. Remember, Rishi Sunak loses the election. Even if he retains his own seat, what do we expect him to do? Resign as party leader, then when his replacement's selected, resign as an MP. Bugger off to California or something. Doesn't matter. We don't expect him to hang around, right? There are Conservative MPs who want to hang around for many years to come. So surely the pressure is on them. But what can they do? What can they do? They can do nothing to force Sunak to call the election earlier, short of threatening to bring him down. And they'd need to do that in large numbers. And if they will not threaten to bring him down in sufficient numbers, Sunak's not under pressure to do anything. What I'm finding with a lot of the commentary around this issue, it is understandable, it is logical. People are anchoring their arguments on the understanding that Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party are trying to do the best they can in this election. But I don't think that's a good assumption. Consider three different players. Look at the way I see things. So Rishi Sunak personally is focused on his own personal wealth. I think that's it. That's all it's about for him. Many Tory MPs are trapped in a state of despair and believing that waiting a bit longer might result in a minor miracle coming to their rescue. And then the third group of players are the rebels, the far right, who want to take over the Conservative Party proper. From their point of view, a terrible result means that they will represent proportionally a larger chunk of the remaining Conservative Parliamentary Party. So it's in the interests of people like Suella Braverman and Liz Truss and Priti Patel that the Conservatives do very badly in the elections as a party. So, yeah, I think that's a much better assumption. Also, where a summer election is concerned, consider that we're told that Sunak doesn't even have a manifesto yet. It's only a couple of weeks ago that a call went round to Tory MPs for policy suggestions. Labour have had a manifesto for 2 years. I mean, yes, they've tweaked it, but they've had one ready to go at various points in the last 2 years. There's another one ready to go now. If Sunak had called the election for May the 2nd, Labour had theirs sorted. They've been working on it for years. I mean, imagine thinking Sunak might call the election on May the 3rd for like June or July without a manifesto ready to go. Now, it doesn't rule anything out. I mean, Sunak may not care. If he wanted to, he could just get the 2019 manifesto, cross off everything they've done, which is not very much, keep the rest of it, and then add a few other bits and pieces. He could knock a manifesto up in a weekend if he's not bothered about it making a great deal of sense or not being well researched. It's not like the Tories are in the habit of following through on their promises anyway. In fact, he might literally reuse the 2019 one and slightly amend it and hope nobody notices. But I'm not seeing any compelling argument that Sunak would consider a summer election unless Tory MPs threaten him. I mean, what would be the purpose if he was going to call an election any roundabout now, you'd have called it on May the 2nd. Limit the damage in the local elections. If you'd have called it on May the 2nd, those Tory mayors probably would have remained Tory mayors. There'd have been no reason for people, or no particular reason for people to feel the need to oust them. So he would have lessened the damage in the local and mayoral elections. So he hasn't done that. So what would be the point in going through bad local election results only to call the election for a month or two later? No. Something would have to change. Something would have to change his thinking. And the only thing that can change his thinking is a threat to his position. So unless and until I see signs of that happening, I am going to remain quite sceptical. I said for a long time, I thought the Tories would be mad to delay beyond May the 2nd. Well, they've done so. They're officially mad. At this point, anything's possible, but I think both Sunak and Tory MPs prefer autumn to summer. Sunak because he wants his India trade deal. I suppose if he could wangle that in the next couple of weeks, sure, maybe summer. But assuming he can't, he will delay as long as is needed to get that deal. And as for Tory MPs in general, as I say, I get the impression they're holding out for a miracle. Maybe the interest rates save them. No, they won't. Or maybe another mini budget statement this September. No. But I think that's what they're holding out for. I think the polling being as bad as it actually is helps Sunak in a perverse sort of way. The results are so bad that it's easy to say to Tory MPs, well, you'd be mad to go to the polls now. But, things can't really get worse, are they? But over summer, they might get better. So I think they're going along with that thinking. So, yeah, I'd be surprised by a summer election. It would be lovely, but I'm not sure very likely. Unless, of course, those local election results are monstrously bad for the Tories. We will see. Less than 2 weeks to find out. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.